Today I'm going to discuss the most important chapter is about the Maniben Alias Bibijan by Shilpa Paral. Of the second year and third year class students, in today's world television has become an integral part of our lives. No longer just a source for entertainment, it's also our window to the world. So here we are going to discuss about the television, how the television is very beneficial in our day-to-day life because it makes awareness about the place and part of the world and whatever is going on and whatever is happening in the other countries or as well as in our country, we can aware about all the parts and all the details and informations which are very beneficial for our day to day life. So how the television is so important in our day to day life and how it's very useful in order to make awareness in the people about the things and about the mm, which kind of informations and whatever is going on in the part of the world and as well as in our country, we can know easily in our drawing room sitting in a one place. No longer just a source for entertainment, it's also our window to the world. By the television we can watch what is happening in various part of the world. Television can transport us mentally from our comfortable drawing room to the place that is on its screen. Fantasy is basically the other side of the realism. In a broad sense, fantasy is a fiction that contains elements of wither dry, magic, supernatural facts, unusual settings, and titles that suspend conventions of realism. Fantasy is basically the other side of realism. In a broad sense, fantasy is a fiction that contains elements of wit, rhyme, magic, supernatural facts, unusual settings, and untitles that suspend conventions of realism. Okay, so fantasy is all about the imagination of a child, of a pupil, whatever pupil are daily imagine about their future, about their day-to-day lives, and their fantasy, their rooming nature, like they making imaginations about their lives. Ki in the next year we we are going to this place and we will be developed in a same manner that the other country have developed today. So this kind of a imagination pupils have while they are watching television, and whatever they see in the television, they also make a fantasy about their cities, about the countries and all that things. So fantasy is all about the imagination, uh, and which is totally connected with the realism. As the pupils are thinking about their future, about the developments of their cities and countries, and compared to the other countries and other cities, uh, they make a just like a fantasy, and which will become true in a realism. So this kind of a connection and this kind of a descriptions we have in this chapter about the realism and the fantasy. Fantasy is so large that has grown so large that several different subcategories now exist. Most people agree that all fiction is fantasy since all fiction is made up of stories about unreal characters. But fantasy is a literary genre with its own themes and characters. So fantasy is so large that has grown so large that several different subcategories now exist. ठीक है? So fantasy is all about the imagination, and there is no limit for the imagination, and it's such a so large and grown so large that several subcategories non-exist. Most people agree that all fictions is fantasy. So whatever fictions we have read in our subjects and whatever in the literature, this all about the fantasy. They all about the imagination, how our imagination power is strong, and is all about the fictions, and fictions is all about the fantasy. Fantasy, since all fantasy is made up of the stories about the unreal characters. So, when the imagination and the fantasy we have grown in our mind, and we ultimately grown and imagine some characters which are unreal, but they are going to create a real story. So, it's all about the fantasy and realism. But fantasy is a literary genre with its own themes and character. फैंटेसी जो है एक लिटरेरी जेनरे है, मतलब इसकी लिटरेरी जनरेशन है विद इट्स ओन थीम, उसकी एक अपनी थीम है और एक करेक्टर है. And the theme is all about what is the main story, what is the main conclusion of the fictions is all about the main theme, and which kind of a message we give up from the novel, from the fictions, and from the story, from the poem, is all about the theme and the characters. The question has already been discussed in the course of our discussion about the story. The date 3rd March 2002 and the place Ahmedabad are both significant because on that particular date communal riots between the Hindu Muslims had erupted in the city of Ahmedabad. The writer is probably trying to give a realistic dimension to an otherwise fantastic story by making this choice. The question has already been discussed in the course of our discussions about the story. The date 3rd March 2002 and the place Ahmedabad are both significant because on the particular date communal riot between the Hindu Muslims had erupted in the city of Ahmedabad. ठीक है? And the writer is probably trying to give a realistic dimensions to an otherwise fantastic stories by making this choice. So this kind of a discussion we have in our course when the 3rd March 2006 and the place is Ahmedabad, and there is a on a particular place there is a communal riots between the Hindu Muslim and had erupted in the city of Ahmedabad, and the writer is probably trying to give a realistic dimensions to an otherwise fantastic story by making this choice. It may sound foolish that Maniben wants to marry Gandhi ji when she was 8 years old. So Maniben यहाँ पे एक 8 year old girl है, and she has a really great imagination power. So through his fantasy, through his imagination, she imagined that she is going to be marry Gandhi ji. Her desire, however, implies she believed in Gandhi ji ideas and non-violence top list because she is believe in their ideologies, non-violence top the list. So this kind of a things um, uh, happening in this story. How the 8 year old girl want to marry a Gandhiji just because of their ideology and non-violence thoughts. Being a believer in a non-violence, and she can never accept her son reactionary ways. Her empathy toward her Muslim countryman is obviously not a sudden development. Being a believer in a non-violence, and she can never accept her son reactionary ways. Her empathy towards her Muslim countryman is obviously not a sudden development. Is is all about the story कि while she is being a believer in the non-violence, she can never accept her son reactionary ways. ठीक है? Her empathy towards her Muslim countryman is obviously not a sudden development. In a short story, a lot has to be read between the lines. The writer may be including an unconscious looking details, but the implications of the same details would reveal a lot to alert and discerning readers. In the short, many one we elder sister Rama is mentioned only twice. At first, we have told that she had committed suicide by jumping into the well on the Dhanteras. A little later another day included, which recounts how Rama would unfailingly throw stones over the compound walls of their Muslim neighbors while passing along with her sister. The implications of these minor details can be many. सो लिटिल यहाँ पे रमा जो है एक लिटिल गर्ल है एंड वी हैव डिस्कस्ड इन द स्टोरी ट्वाइसली हर whilst firstly she when she tried to jump suicide jumping on the well on the Dhanteras day, and the secondly while she throwing stones over the compound walls of their Muslim neighbors while passing along with her sister. The implications of these minor details can be many. The conclusion: in today's world, television has become an integral part of our lives. In today's world, television has become an integral part of our lives, no longer just a source for entertainment, it's also our window to the world. By the television, we can watch what is happening in various parts of the world. So in this chapter we have discussed about the imagination power, about the two girls, as the Maniben and the Rama, and how they decided all the things and imagine the fantasy, and how the television is playing a very important role in our day-to-day lives. And now I'm going to discuss about the questions. As a little girl, many men want to marry a Gandhiji. What does this tell us about the many men? So in this story, I have already discussed with you. First of all, you have to follow the structure, which is very important. First of all, you have to give the introduction about the chapter, whatever is discussed in chapter about the television and about the fantasy, and which is also connected the realism and the imagination power of the small girls Manivan and the Rama, who is also playing a very important role in the chapter. So you have to write all these paragraphs, which is very important according to your structure of your answer. So first of all, you have to give the introduction. And in day-to-day world, television has become an integral part of our lives, no longer just as a source of it for the entertainment, and it also our window to the world. So then you have to discuss about the fantasy is basically the other side of the realism. In a broad sense, the fantasy is a fiction that contains elements of the wizard, magic, supernatural, fantasy, unusually static, and entitled as suspend convention of realism. ठीक है? And the question has already been discussed in the course of your discussion about the story. The date 3rd March 2002 and the place Ahmedabad are both are significant because on the particular date communal riots between the Hindu Muslim had erupted in the city of Ahmedabad. It may sound foolish and that Maniman wants to marry Gandhiji when she was 8 years old, and her desire, however, implies she believed in Gandhiji ideals and non-violence top it in the list. So, being a believer in a non-violence, and she can never accept her son dictionary ways. In a short story, a lot has to be read between the lines. The writer may be including an unconscious looking details, but implication of the same details would reveal a lot of to the alert and discussion readers. At first, we have told her she had committed suicide by jumping into the Walton terrace, and secondly, thrown stones on the compound walls of the Muslim neighbors while passing along with her sisters. So, conclusion I have already discussed with you. I hope you like this video, which is very important according to your examination point of view. Thank you so much.